Most people think loneliness is about being alone. It is not. The loneliest people on earth are surrounded by others. They show up, they engage, they laugh at the right moments, and then they go home and feel nothing was real. Not because something is wrong with them, but because something in them has been switched on that cannot be switched off, and nobody around them is carrying the same weight. There is a particular kind of person who feels everything too completely, not emotionally unstable, not dramatic, not broken, just deeply tuned in to what is actually happening beneath the surface of things. They walk into a room and feel the tension before anyone speaks. They sit across from someone and know without being told that the smile is performance. They listen to a conversation and hear not just the words, but the fear underneath the words. This is not a skill they chose. It is not something they trained. It is simply how they experience the world. And for a long time, they think this is normal. They assume everyone sees what they see, and everyone feels the weight they feel. Then slowly, quietly, it becomes clear they do not. Most people move through life on the surface, not because they are shallow, but because the surface is where it is comfortable, where things are simple, agreed upon, and easy to hold. The self-aware person cannot stay there. They see through things too naturally. A casual conversation becomes a study in what is left unsaid. A friendship becomes a quiet awareness of what is real and what is being maintained for comfort. A relationship becomes an honest reckoning with whether two people are truly known to each other or simply familiar. And this clarity is a gift until it is not. Because the same depth that allows them to feel everything completely is the same depth that makes them impossible to fully reach. They have seen too much, they know too much about how people work, and they cannot pretend otherwise. That is where the loneliness begins, not in isolation, in the gap between what they experience and what the people around them can meet them with. Stay with me, because this is where it gets important. In the winter of 1831, a German philosopher sat alone in a rented apartment in Frankfurt. His name was Arthur Schopenhauer. He had spent the better part of his life studying human nature. Not abstractly, not academically. He had watched people, dissected their motivations, traced the invisible forces driving every decision, every desire, every fear. He understood people deeply, more deeply than almost anyone who had ever lived. And he was profoundly, completely alone. Not for lack of trying. He had attempted connection, he had sought conversation, he had sat across from the educated men of his time and found them hollow. Not because they were stupid, because they were comfortable with the surface, and he had lost the ability to stay there. He wrote once that the amount of noise a person can endure without discomfort is directly proportional to their emptiness. What he was really saying was this: the deeper a person goes, the harder the world becomes to tolerate. Schopenhauer spent his final decades with a poodle named Atma, a name taken from the Sanskrit word for the universal soul. He did not name his dog that by accident. He found in that animal what he could rarely find in a room full of people: presence without performance, depth without the need to explain it. The story of Schopenhauer is not a tragedy. It is a diagnosis. He was not broken by his understanding, he was shaped by it, and the shape that emerged could not fit comfortably into the spaces most people inhabit. That is the thing about self-awareness at a certain depth. It does not destroy your capacity for connection. It changes what connection has to mean before it feels real. Here is what nobody says directly. Most relationships operate on a kind of shared agreement not to go too deep, to keep things warm, manageable, safe. And most people are comfortable with that agreement. They are not pretending. They are not performing. They genuinely do not feel the pull towards something more. The self-aware person does feel that pull all the time, and so they sit in rooms full of people they genuinely like and feel the specific loneliness of knowing that what they carry cannot be shared here. Not because these people are incapable, because they have not been broken open in the same way. Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, I hold this to be the highest task of a bond between two people, that each should stand guard over the solitude of the other. Most people read that as romantic. It is not. It is a recognition that depth requires space, that the most honest form of love is not the attempt to fill another person's emptiness, but the willingness to stand beside it without flinching. The self-aware person is not looking for someone to fix the loneliness. They are looking for someone who can sit inside it with them without needing to escape. That person is rare. And waiting for them in every casual encounter is how years disappear. So what does a person do with this? The first thing is to stop treating the loneliness as evidence of failure. It is not a sign that something went wrong in you. It is a sign that something went very right. You developed a capacity most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The ability to see clearly, to feel completely, to refuse the comfortable lie. That is not a wound. It is a kind of integrity. The second thing is to understand that connection does not require someone to carry the same depth. It requires someone who respects that yours exists. There is a difference between a person who understands everything you feel and a person who does not need you to be less than you are. The second kind is far more common and far more sustaining. The loneliness does not disappear. It changes shape. It becomes less about the gap between you and others and more about the specific, quiet fullness of knowing yourself completely. Schopenhauer died in 1860, alone in his apartment, eating breakfast. No final words, no dramatic ending, just a man who had understood more about human nature than almost anyone before him, sitting with that understanding to the very end. Most people would call that sad. He would not have. He had spent his life being fully, completely himself, in a world that rarely asks for that. That is not emptiness. That is a different kind of wholeness. This is what Stoic clarity exists for, not to make you feel better about where you are, but to make you see it clearly, because clarity is the only thing that actually changes anything. If this is the kind of conversation you have been looking for, you already know what to do. The loneliness of depth is not a prison. It is the cost of being real in a world that rarely asks for it.